I don't know. Are these talk? Can they hear us?
Pretty sure they can, yeah.
Is that in the camera or? Got it. Okay. Do you know if this is
Are these going to
for
be
here or? Okay.
Are these going to be on? Yeah, they're good. Okay.
Julie and
I don't know if they're going to be like this.
Who's over there?
Okay, someone. Did you want something different?
Students and guests, if you will do me a favor, we're going to do a very quick sound check. So if I can get you to hold the noise down in the room real quick. Thank you.
And I just make sure it keeps pointed at them.
I was actually going down to Albuquerque to drive with my dad.
Well, I was at KWTV. I was the 6 in 10 anchor at the time.
You want to keep going?
So, ladies and gentlemen, because we're not using any microphones today, as you come in, I'm going to ask you to move forward so that you can hear and we don't have to yell at you, yes? So if there are empty sections in front of you, please fill in the front first. And then if you are a West student, you should be sitting on the left or the right. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
It's literally closer than the third.
Yeah, I was
The distance from us.
I was pulling in health science. You know where that is? Relatively
To where
speaking,
the people are seeing.
it's very close. It's very close. It's very close to downtown.
I feel great.
Oh yeah.
Is this? What's this office? This is so cool. That's awesome.
So you're going to have to think about how from here to there. Yeah.
That's what you're talking about when we changed them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got from there to there.
We got 3 focal points.
So do you try and?
I have.
Why not?
Five junior
The whole time when you
I'm just going to get
only move like the legs, but keep
Only
the torso
move my
very
legs.
stiff.
I'm gonna do Wiggins' fire and fire.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Sprinkler thing. I like it.
Everybody.
Are you guys going to be back there?
Also, let the whole
When we're speaking, we'll be up here.
We'll be up here.
Yeah.
Are the stools a bit too far away from where you want to stand? Are you happy with where they are?
I like the distance.
Kiss me. Yeah, because it goes up and on.
Thank you, Louise. I don't really have enough.
And then we all. Yeah.
We waited.
We waited. Yeah, I feel like it took about 5 minutes to reconnect them, but it's because it took about, because we were like, talking about it. So they went inactive. So I feel like it's better if we just wait to hook them up until after, and then take our time, you know? Do we want the lyrics here just in case? Then I'll leave my phone right there. I'm just gonna, yeah, because I can just, grab it because Evan's talking the last ones.
But Evan likes to bring his, for the last one,
Oh yeah,
brings
so then it's fine, and it'll be there anyways, and so I'll just pack them. putting it with my face ID in the middle of our especially if I'm
I can't wait to go, this is my diary. Because if I go, this is my old man diary. Yeah. With the Jaguar.
don't forget those.
That's it. Maybe this.
I'm
Not too much. Could be super oversized muscle.
and we're staring at hundreds of people.
And then you don't need to do, I mean, I get up and things it might be interesting, so it's better to focus.
You can feel it for just a
I'll,
second. Like,
I'll kind of get up to here.
Around me is
But if I can just walk into the space. So where's the frame?
I mean, we have three, so as long as you're like right now we're at four.
No.
My knees are going to be like everywhere by the end of the
Perfect, thank you.
Do you know where this recording is?
Yeah, live stream.
Live streaming, it's not a safe recording. Or no, you're recording.
Yeah, we're recording.
Recording is safe, but the hosting is.
We got two different things.
Yeah.
What's the live stream for?
Our Hudson North and Hudson City live stream, because this is going to end right when they're ready to close out and get on buses, so we can't get everybody around. Our students would fill the whole place. So we're not
What are these photographers? Where are we able to get these pictures?
So this is a story for State Impact Oklahoma and NPR. NPR will run the radio story, and State Impact Oklahoma will run the radio and the online story. So there will be a link available, like on KOSC.org, KGOU.org, and the public radio station.
When will that be available?
I'm going to put it together right after the show, and then have it ready tomorrow morning.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I'm scared of
By the way, if one of you guys want to talk to me after the show for a quick interview, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to. Let's do it.
Okay, we're going to try the headphones, guys.
I know I do. This is not.
were we able to get on?
Sound check.
Yeah, mine's a little loud.
I'll do the same. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm leaving my phone up here. Yeah, I'm not going to use my monitor for
Yeah.
Perfect.
Because they're recorded, we want to keep them out for as long as we can.
We good to go? Yes? All right.
Hello, students, Putnam City West students, and guests. Welcome to this afternoon's production. At this time, we would ask that you silence and put away all of your electronic devices. And please help me in welcoming Elizabeth Mon, Steve Gilroy, and Oklahoma City University to the stage.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's performance. I'm Elizabeth Mon, like he just mentioned. I am the Fine Arts Project Manager at the Oklahoma State Department of Education. So what that means is that I help support educators in all areas of fine arts: dance, drama, theater, media arts, music, and visual arts. That includes theater, like today. And I try to support those teachers so they can help give you a great education in the arts. But I also help with big projects that can have an impact across the state, which brings us to In the Middle of the West. This is not your typical play. This is not fiction. It's not made up, and it doesn't follow a traditional storyline. Instead, it's a form of theater called verbatim theater, which means the script is made entirely from real interviews with real people. And in this case, people who were directly impacted by the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. The people in this play include survivors, first responders, journalists, and family members. Their exact words, right down to the pauses, the repetitions, the emotions, were collected, shaped, and structured into the theatrical piece by Steve Gilroy, who is here to speak with you today. So when you engage with this play, you're hearing real stories of what happened here in Oklahoma 30 years ago, not imagined characters, and that's part of what makes it so powerful. I also want you to think, theater students out there, about this piece as artists and creators. Verbatim theater is not just about the performance, it's about listening, about being curious, about turning life into art that carries meaning, feeling, and truth. And the process of gathering and shaping these stories can be just as transformative as the final product. So you could create verbatim theater from your own life or from Oklahoma's rich history. Ask yourself today what stands out, what moves you, what questions it raises, and think about what stories, big or small, you might want to tell one day. So without further ado, please welcome Steve Gilroy and Oklahoma City University students.
Good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you. Thanks for coming. My name's Steve. 11 years ago, I was commissioned to come to Oklahoma City to lead a project which was about capturing the testimony, the witness testimony of those who had some association with the Oklahoma City bombing. And that's people who maybe had a very marginal little, maybe they were in the city when it happened, to people that were right in the center of that event. And you might be wondering why, can you guess that I'm not from Oklahoma or Tulsa, even? Anyone guess where I'm from? Yeah, that's right. So, but the reason is I've specialized in this kind of play creation, this type of theater for many years, and that was the connection, and that's why I ended up involved in this project. I had no idea that 11 years later I'd be back here with you this afternoon, but it's just through the work with Elizabeth's efforts, and our relationship that we've kept going since before COVID, because that was initially when it was supposed to happen. So thanks to Elizabeth for making this happen, because without her, I wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be doing this. So this is really good. A couple of things to say. The original production, In the Middle of the West, was performed at the Berg Theatre in Oklahoma City, at Oklahoma City University campus, back in 2015. And a few years later, I directed a British version, not British, it was still American and Oklahoma, but in England, a few years later. That play was about between 90 minutes or an hour and a half, hour and 3/4 long. This is not what you're going to see this afternoon. This is a special, little edited sample of that play. It's going to be about 35 minutes long. So, you can rest easy. It's not going to be, if you need the loo, you might just about make it through. So it's not going to, so hopefully, but hopefully there's enough of this that it'll give you a sense of what the original production was. I'm going to talk about our rehearsals afterwards, but the one other thing I wanted to say to you, we're using a method here, a verbatim method called headphone verbatim, sometimes called recorded delivery. What it means is, you may not be able to tell from there, you can see there's some technical gubbins over here over this side, but all the actors have earpieces. Yeah? So I'm in control of the audio recording of the play, of these interviews, and they're going to be broadcast directly to the actors on stage. It's called headphone verbatim. Everyone clear about that? You good? Great. Well, we'll get going. So, in the middle of the West, this is Jennifer Reynolds. She's a journalist and a TV news anchor.
Well, I was KWTV. I was the 6 and 10 anchor at the time, and I'd been there for 8 years, and I'd been anchoring for 5, and so that's basically my relationship with it, is that it was the biggest story, obviously, of my career in television. And when you take states like Oklahoma, we're a frontier state, people who came here were just amazed. We didn't really ever ask for any help. If someone came in and just devastated the heart of our city, and we just started saying, okay, well, I've got some cranes. Well, yeah, I'll bring them. And we're iron workers, and we're on our way. And we got cutting torches. I've got a pizza oven. I'll bring it. And Oklahomans are just, we are so self-reliant. So we do not like a government that encourages people, that just takes away people's self-reliance. We're very law and order conscious. If law and order broke down in this city, everyone would go out and reestablish it. That'd be the first thing that would happen. And we're only a couple generations off the prairie here. My great-grandmother came over on a wagon, and that's not unusual here. They looked very weathered and worn and tired because it was a very tough life here. And when you came out here and you spend like a year or two just living basically in a hole in the ground, these are very, very strong women. And they were stern, and they were hardworking, and they were generally quite devout. And they knew everything. They knew everything. And they do everything. They do little needlework. They can milk a cow. They would help their husbands build fences. And the British sea captain and the American pioneer woman, they're the two most extraordinary women.
This is Sam Gonzalez, ex-chief of police, Oklahoma City. This is Ron Norrick, ex-mayor, Oklahoma City.
We had a mayor's prayer breakfast at the convention center. About 1,200 people there, and I sat at the table with the city manager, and it was a prayer breakfast, meaning we were together praying for guidance for our community, guidance for our leaders. Then you have this massive incident. Nobody's seen this. Nobody's read it but me. I kept a diary during the bombing every day. I could tell you exactly the time I left. It was about 8:45.
I went down to my business office, just south of Baptist Hospital, right off the expressway. It's a 5-story building, but it shook like an earthquake.
Well, I, like most people when I first sat there, I didn't think it was a bombing. As I approached it, I thought it might be some kind of natural gas explosion. I drove up to the scene and saw the huge crater, and being a police officer, I knew what it was. Car bomb or truck bomb.
I went over to the site and saw it was still smoking. I thought, what is it? Was it a bomb? What? What do you mean it was a bomb? I'm thinking it was either an airplane's crashed, gas lines blown up, or a fuel truck. Something like that, but not a bomb.
First couple hours are chaos, and I don't care whether it's here or New York City or where. There's still a lot of bodies laying out in open view. There's a lot of people in the building screaming for help, and there's a lot of people, not trained people, just people.
It was traumatic because we lost 168 people, 19 kids, and it was 3 weeks before we recovered the last of the bodies, and I was with the families when we recovered the last 2. They were in what's called the rubble pile. The whole building collapsed, and they removed all the rubble, and sure enough. So, that's pretty personal.
I connected with my granddaughter. She was born April 3rd. So my therapy at night was to go home and hug her and rock her in a rocking chair. And probably what I remember most about her, that's what helped me make it through, because we lost a lot of babies in Oklahoma City.
McVeigh, he was mad at the federal government. And he thought that by him bombing this federal building on the anniversary of Waco, which was 2 years earlier, that people would rally around him and overthrow the government. Well, the opposite happened. This country is attacked. One thing about our citizens is we may be Democrats, Republicans, but we fight. But it's kind of like, a family. If you get in a family will fight, you better not get in the middle of a family fight. You're going to get in trouble. The opposite happened.
The response in Oklahoma City was different than anywhere else in the United States. When the New York bombing at the First Trade Center, that they had street vendors selling coffee for $2 to the rescue workers. And in Oklahoma City, coffee was free. If they had any money, it was called an Oklahoma dollar. People knew that they were rescue workers. They weren't going to pay for anything. They called it an Oklahoma dollar because it couldn't be spent.
I loved it. I was in office for 3 terms, but it just was physical wear out. I'm tired. I'm just tired.
I finally quit work when I was 70. I thought about it every day, talked about it every day, constantly reliving it. You want to make sure that you don't let it define you, who you are. And sometimes that's hard.
This is Jan. She's a dentist. And this is Chris. He's a doctor.
I was actually taking off the rest of the week, and I was going to Albuquerque to visit my dad. And I was kind of getting up, getting ready to go, and I took the dog to the vet. So I take the dog to the vet, and all of a sudden we hear this boom, and I'm on 22nd and 3rd, right? And it sounded like a sonic boom kind of thing. So I go to pick up my cleaning, and they had some boiler thing going off downtown, and I thought, okay, no big deal. So I ended up packing, and I flipped the TV on. And on the TV, I saw, a helicopter flying over the building, and I just went, oh my God.
I was just pulling in to the Health Science Center. Do you know where that is? Relatively speaking, it's very close. Very close. It's very close to downtown. And I was just pulling in to the parking lot, and I had my back to the city when the bomb went off. And I didn't know what it was, but it was the huge explosion that I could feel. I turned around and looked, and there was this massive plume of white smoke coming up into the sky. I saw it was downtown, and I immediately thought somebody had bombed the courthouse. I was terrified that our clerks were there. They are like family. I mean, we are so close to these young people.
They were calling for medical personnel, and so I looked at Jeannie and I said, well, what do I do? I can't leave now. So I called my nurse and I said, I'm picking you up. We're going down there. So by the time we got down there, the first wave had kind of come through. You know, they got in the OR set up, and so we set up a triage system, and we were, triaging people were coming in. But what amazed me was how quickly, without any practice or anything, people got organized. We had the ERs manned with people in every room, and when people came in, somebody already there for them.
It wasn't the courthouse. It was right next door. The Murrah building is immediately across the street. We were so shaken by this. It was unbelievably huge. You just cannot imagine. For a city like this, the magnitude of this event, we just needed to do something. So let's go find some place to donate blood. But there was an enormous line, 6-7 hours, and we were in line with 3-piece suits and Hell's Angels motorcyclists. The array of humanity that was in this building, all for the same purpose, was stunning.
So, we put out a couple of lines to people, things like that. Shit, I do that in my sleep, so. But once that first kind of wave hit, we were waiting. And we waited. And we waited. That was just, that was tough. That was the toughest part, just waiting for people to come in, and they were all gone.
I'm a dentist, and I was teaching at the dental school at the time, and one of my colleague professors was walking around with a pad, taking names of everybody that wanted to go down and help. And I went looking for him and I found him and said, put my name on this too. I had never done body identification, and I had no experience whatsoever, but my professor, he was the chief dental officer, and he just trained everybody as we went. And we would take x-rays of the bodies brought in. If we were lucky, we already had dental records. We could start comparing dental records, which is a really, really good way to identify a body. It's almost as good as a fingerprint. But what did bother me pretty quickly was everybody had the same expression on their faces. I actually talked to my professor about this because it was disturbing to me. They looked like, the faces looked like monks the scream. Was that what they were doing? Were they screaming? It was like this. He said, no, what happens in a bomb is you get this huge blast, and then your lungs go, and that was the expression. They were frozen in their last expression, and I just hated the thought that they were their moment was of that kind of terror. And he said they never knew what happened. It was so rapid. My biggest fear was his child being brought in. You saw the photograph of Bailey, the famous photograph of the firefighter with the baby in his arms, and I didn't know how I would handle finding a child.
Well, it was interesting that the country itself was looking at us. Sort of how we handled this, and the fact that we all came together, everybody jumped in. They were just commenting how wonderful this was. And my first thought was, that doesn't surprise me at all. That's who we are here. It's Oklahoma. It's Midwest,
Here in Oklahoma, on the other hand, we need some more gloves. Truckloads would come. And same thing with bottled water, food, stuff was coming constantly. Everybody was trying to bring a casserole. This is what we do when there's a disaster of any kind, personal or on a big scale. You gotta cook something and bring it and help.
When President Clinton came in, hearing Clinton talk, it's amazing. You know, regardless of his politics.
I still hold it as the most positive, best experience I've ever had in my life. It wasn't horrific at all. It was felt so important, so important. So I've always cherished the experience.
This is Jane, and this is Janet, and they work in the archive at the Oklahoma Memorial. And this is Claude, Jane's husband.
I say to the children, look at the facts. See what happened that day. And I usually will tell them it was a horrific day and we didn't know what had happened. But I'm a volunteer here at the memorial, so this is the archive. Every kind of artifact that you can think of related to the bombing. Anything you can imagine, it's probably here. Lots of items that we collected from the fence after the bombing. They put up a temporary fence around the site. And people put things such as people have combs or Mardi Gras beads, tassels, flags.
Nobody dreamed of the fence. That took us all by surprise.
There were watches or pacifiers. All these items were from 95 up until now. And we're still collecting them and bringing them in.
They put together a committee, and I got a letter, probably because I work with the Oklahoma Historical Society, but I got a letter asking if I would serve on one of the committees.
I mean, they started the whole thing within the first year, and there would be groups that met and came up with a mission statement that we come here to remember those who died, those who survived, and those who will be changed forever. Those who leave here should know the meaning of violence. I don't remember all of it.
It was a group of people that we needed to think about preserving the materials related to the bombing. And ultimately, and that's where we began to finally collect the materials. We had a Lincoln Town Car. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I was driving Claude's car, and I was loading all of this into the Lincoln, and I couldn't believe the stuff I put in this car. They wouldn't put in a car. Oh, not just boxes, but pieces of fence, pieces of that elevator door. I was putting
My Lincoln, I might add.
just leather seats. I was worried so about them. It's the body bags, all kinds of stuff moved in that
Not with the bodies, just the bags.
wash tubs. And this guy said to me, "Are you going to put all this stuff in this Lincoln?" And I said, "It's all I have." So Claude comes up and he says, "You have to have a truck." And that's when you got me that Ford truck.
Oh,
That-
the little
the Ford Ranger.
The Ford Ranger. Yes. And she moves stuff.
I moved
I don't even know how many.
unbelievable stuff in that Ford Ranger. My first task was to clean up what I could and sort all of this stuff that had been taken on. These are people's pictures, the stuff from their desks, all of these things came out to that warehouse. It was very emotionally taxing. The artifacts were difficult to handle. Working with the family members and survivors, I knew it was hard on them. After I cleaned it up, the first thing I did was I got pallets and laid it out. And then we let the people come, and I put all the pictures together. And that's when Doris Jones found the picture of her daughter's, her ultrasound of her grandbaby. Her daughter was pregnant, and she had just gotten her ultrasound that morning. And Doris Jones was going through and found her daughter's ultrasound. And after that, what was left is what ultimately led to the.
But one of the toughest things that they had to do was to define who a survivor was. Where were you that day? Were you on the south side of the street? You were not a survivor. If you were on the north side of the street, then you were. They had to draw a perimeter. People that were a mile away were saying, well, I heard the blast, so I'm a survivor. They couldn't do that. And that was how, basically, to get the names on the survivor wall. If I was in this room and the lights went out, I'd be under the table. I'd carry a flashlight in my purse for years. It was pitch dark. I mean, it was so dark. We were on the first floor, so everything was coming down on top of us, and then plus the bomb was right outside our office. So we had the residue of the bomb coming in, and all this stuff coming down on top of you, and you could taste it. You couldn't breathe. Our office we had very low turnover. Most of us had been there 20 plus years. When I got out, one of the younger girls, they had got her out. She had asthma. She was having a hard time breathing. So I stopped to ask her if she was okay, and she just begged me not to leave her. And she was scared. And what am I going to do? I didn't know what was going on. And at least I could help somebody. So, and then they brought out one of the girls from the office and laid her on the sidewalk. And they came up to you, asked us, do you know who that is? I said, I have no idea. I couldn't recognize her. It was one of our coworkers. And then they had found one of our supervisors that had died. And they put her over in a corner so nobody could walk on her or step on her. But I don't know, it's hard. We were like family,
You are on your knees. And how do you get the first step up and get back on your feet? Because at first, it just seems impossible. For us survivors, it was that tree leafing out. For family members, it was all those messages left on the fence. These symbols of hope, they were what caused you to be able to put yourself back together a little bit.
After the bombing, the whole area around the Murrah building was devastated. But in the car park, what used to be the car park at the front of the building, there were the remnants of a tree, an old tree. This is Mark Bays. He's an arborist. That's a tree surgeon.
It was just this spindly, ugly-looking thing with half of it gone. One of the first things that I was debating, because not to bore you with the science part of it too much, but trees' food are produced in the leaves. And whenever you remove 50% of that food production, be in the leaves, that tree becomes risky for not being able to recover from that. Okay, do we sacrifice this one branch over here, or do we try and focus on the whole thing? Trees have the ability to respond and to react, and so I listen to them. I always talk to people. I talk to trees, and they talk to me. And they do. If you understand, you can visualize what they're trying to communicate to you. And so I sit there, let's just not do anything, because it's been through so much in such a short time. Let's just visually monitor the tree and see what happens. Well, about a month later or so, we saw these little tiny sprouts starting to come up. And I can honestly say this, that I used to have a tree care company. And you always hear about accidents in tree care companies. I've fallen out of a tree. No, you didn't fall out of the tree threw you out. and because you weren't doing what was right. And I've never fallen out of a tree in my whole career. In the tree, for a number of years, you could find glass still in the bark in the crown of the tree. If you had a piece of glass in your hand, sometimes it's better if it's a small piece, you can just take it out. Unlike people, trees don't completely heal over their wounds. They close off those wounds. It compartmentalizes it. We all experience tragedy in our life. I lost my mom, I lost my dad. We all get beyond tragedy. But when my mom passed away, I was the only one in the room at the time that she went. I walked out of the hospital and I was just in the middle of nowhere, just standing near a couple of trees, and out of nowhere, a minister came up and he just starts talking to me. Hey, how was your day? And and I don't know if it was that tree that he was walking by or if he just came and found me. I just feel that the spirit of the trees live in me, and they help us get beyond tragedy. And that's really what this tree means to me. It's my connection to remembering that we can get beyond tragedy.
This is Chris. He's a first responder and a firefighter. And this is Aaron. She's a mum. And this is Bella. And that's her daughter.
It's just a normal morning. I mean, a beautiful day. I got up and got my coffee and went to the station, and the Murrah building was on 5th Street. My station was on 22nd Street, and it rocked our station. It rattled the windows. Just jumped in the rig, got as close as we could, and started our rig, and we was there till 11 o'clock that night. A lot of people, I don't think, connect the dots that Bailey was actually handed to me by a police officer named John Avery. He was just in street clothes, and I think he was working off duty or something, and he came from around. I don't know where he came from, to be honest with you, but police aren't trained as EMTs or first responders or whatever, so he was just looking for somebody, and he found me, and he had a critical infant. So I said, here, I'll take her, and that's when, I guess that photo was snapped when he handed her to me, and photo snapped to me, handed.
I got up that morning and I got Bailey ready for daycare because I had to go to work. And I dropped her off at daycare around 8 a.m. and I was at work and we felt the explosion. There was just been an explosion in the federal courthouse. And I was like, oh my God, my daughter's right across the street from there. And I got to the front of the building and I saw it. And I knew there was no way she would have made it out. My mom had known a nurse that worked there. So she got on the phone and she called St. Anthony's and she said, there's a child that sounds just like Bailey at St. Anthony's. So just standing there with my mother and my sister, and the doctor walks around the corner with the priest, and I just knew that she was gone, that she was in their morgue. And Chris had put her in the ambulance, and they gotten all the hurt people out, and they put her in the morgue. People think that people that are deceased look so peaceful, but it just wasn't like that for me. I didn't think she looked peaceful at all. But I remember the next day I woke up, I saw the paper, the newspaper, and there was that picture of Chris and Bailey on the front of it. To know that I had lost a child and I had everybody else see her dead too.
I look back and I think it seems like I walked forever with her, but it was probably not even 20 feet. By the time I got there, they already had 2 patients put in the back of their ambulance. That's when the rescue effort was going pretty hot and heavy. I checked her for signs of life, and I didn't find any. It's a tough moment for me here. I told her I had a critical infant, and the ambulance was already full. The reason I'm standing there looking at her, holding her, was I was waiting on the paramedics to get a blanket out, because we weren't going to put that baby on the ground. So anyway, So once we got the blanket out, I sat down and I pat her on the back and I told her, you know, I gotta catch up with my crew, and that was really the last encounter I had with any of that until the next day. Can I step out just for a second?
We've never, as long as we've been friends, that was the first time
Yeah.
I've ever heard his.
I've never seen him cry like that. He usually keeps it together pretty good.
Well, the picture came out in the next day. Our chief dispatcher called me. He asked me, he said, Chris, did you carry a baby out? And I said, no. I said, a gentleman handed me a baby. He said he got a picture faxed. They wanted someone to identify the firefighter in the photo. And he said, Chris, it looks like you in the photo. Well, I went back to bed and I woke up the next morning. Guys are carrying in local newspaper, USA Today, you know, Forward, Telegram Star, whatever it is. And sure enough, it had gone worldwide.
Can I say something about the picture? The picture it's in our textbooks, our Oklahoma history textbooks. And it's always been basically unavoidable, the picture itself. Whether you were just searching her name online, it's everywhere. And the teachers find out who your sister is, and they make a point to ask about it and share it with the school. So it was really hard for me and my brother. You want to see the pictures of her smiling and the pictures of her playing, having fun with all your cousins. You don't want to see the pictures of her dead body, basically.
I wish that photo was never taken, and I'm sure Chris feels the same way.
Yeah,
It's in my face every day.
every day.
And it's just on the front of T-shirts and coffee mugs, and there was nothing I could do about
Yeah,
it.
we tried to stop it, but we couldn't. Local reporter here, she called me, and I guess she'd already talked to Aaron, because she called me and asked me if I would be willing to meet with Bailey's mother. And I was real apprehensive, and I felt like it was what I needed to do.
And she just called me and asked if I wanted to meet him, and I said, yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't feel like there was something that he didn't do for her to live. I was grateful that she didn't just get laid down. And I knew they couldn't do anything, and they just laid him down to die. And I was grateful that someone cared enough.
I always felt like I dealt with a lot of stuff because I felt guilty. I was the last person to hold her, to hold the baby, so that's why I feel like I guess if I'm 99 and she needs some, I'll be there for her.
I think that this whole journey's been made easier knowing Chris. I mean, he's been there for me anytime I needed him. I mean, if anything came out of the bombing, it was my relationship with Chris. It's made a big difference in this living hell.
It's been a tough road. Almost lost my wife and my kid. Finally dropped the John Wayne persona we firemen like to carry, and went and got some help I needed to get, and we're all in a better place.
The more I look at that picture, it's just, I don't think it memorializes her, it memorializes everybody who died that day, because everybody is somebody's child. That wasn't who Bailey was. She wasn't the baby in the fireman's arms. She was my child.
This is Christy, and this is Rebecca.
I just would automatically know that I was in the bombing. There was never a time when I was like, oh, I'm in the bombing. It's like knowing your eyes are blue.
I was 4 months old to the day. I think just from my parents telling the stories, I think I've sort of pieced it together, the memories. My dad was trying to get past the barricades because, he just assumed that I was trapped under some rubble or something. And of course they wouldn't let him through. But he was noticing that anyone who had on gloves was getting through because policemen, fire people had gloves on. And he said that he found a dirty glove on the ground. And he put one hand in his pocket and the other glove on, and he was allowed through and started digging through the rubble. And that he found a place where I'd been and found my baby blankets.
Brandon and I were at the daycare center, and we were sitting all around a table playing with Play-Doh. So all of us survivors were at this table together, and then when the bombing happened, everybody that wasn't at the table, nobody else survived. So the whole left side of my body was burned, and I broke my collarbone, and I had a piece of crowbar stuck in my upper thigh.
I was in the infant nursery at the YWCA across the street, and as far as I know, all the kids at the Y were pretty much fine. My parents told me that I had a piece of glass in my toe. My toe's fine, by the way.
When I look at pictures of myself, from interviews or when people just wanted to come over and meet me, I had this look on my face, like a blank look with a kind of a polite smile. That was my childhood. I always just had to say certain things. That was who I was. And that's just a very strange concept for a 6-year-old.
It was never really discussed completely. They said somewhere that they had a box of stuff if I was ever interested. And I always seemed like an awkward thing to ask. But we never really talked about it. It was never something we discussed.
After it first happened, my dad really liked to, tell his story, go out, talk to people, tell his own story. And he loved letting people know that, took every opportunity to let people know that our family was good or that what we were up to. So at restaurants, he would just bring it up with our server, he just thought they would want to know. Why he would say, why my children might look familiar to you is because of blah, blah, blah. And Brandon and I would just sit there and go, okay.
I always sort of felt like my dad would tell people that I was in the bombing, almost like I had been the first place winner of a spelling bee, sort of bragging that his child was so special. And yeah.
I used to let it define me a lot. In Oklahoma, we're very tied together, we're very open, and people just thought that they could ask questions and bring up the bombing. But I'm able to talk about it now, but when I was 11 or 12 years old, I shouldn't have been talking about it. I should have been concentrating on playing outside or seeing the new movie with my friends. It's something that I struggled with in high school. I was very if I did anything wrong, whether it was, getting in trouble with a teacher or getting an F on a test, whatever I did, my first response wasn't oh man, I should have tried harder at that. It was the people that survived. If they were here, they would have done it better than me. I don't feel that way anymore. But because this happens all over the world, somebody's always getting hurt. Their lives are affected the same way mine was. So it's not my burden. It's everybody's burden.
Occasionally the response that I get after they hear I was in the bombing was, oh, you must be so glad that McVan was executed. And no, I'm actually not. I'm very anti-death penalty. Oklahoma's so conservative.
I just got so tired of people being so angry. Every time someone brought up McVeigh, which is understandable, they would get angry. But I just got so tired of it. I'm just tired of being angry. Yeah, he's not a good person. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life being angry about something I couldn't control.
I mean, Timothy McVeigh didn't have anything against me personally. The point wasn't to kill an individual person.
My fiance, before he met my dad, I had to say, listen, I usually don't talk about this a lot, but I need you to know what happened. And before he met my dad, well, we met at Olive Garden, and my dad, like 5 seconds into meeting him, said something, and it just went down from there. He knew of it, but he didn't know, like, the specifics. But that was, like, my first time getting a new group of friends, and I wanted to not be that girl. I wanted to be another person. No, not another person, but a new version, I guess, of me.
But this is Bud. He's a dad.
Julie had met a little girl in the 8th grade. There was a foreign exchange student from Mexico, and the little girl had come to learn English. And Julie was fascinated with how quickly the little girl learned English. And she called me up at my Texaco station, and she was just all excited. The question my 13-year-old had for me was, Dad, do you think that I could learn to speak Spanish as quickly as she learned to speak English? I'd take her home every afternoon from school, and we'd usually get something to eat. And when she was a little kid, we'd stop at McDonald's, and she'd get Happy Meals, and as she got older, the hamburgers started getting bigger. But anyway, she was determined to go foreign exchange. I'd take her home, and I'd go back to my Texaco station, and if she had something that she really wanted to do bad, she'd call Dad at the Texaco station, but she'd wait to rush period to do it. And she'd figured out as a little girl that I was much more agreeable during rush period than I was the rest of the time, because my motive was to get her off the phone so I could take care of my customers. She said, Dad, I want to go foreign exchange, and I want to go to a Spanish-speaking country. A year in Spain. Actually, 2 years in Spain. And she said, I want to go home, and I want to work for a while, and then I'd like to get my master's. And then she got a job as a Spanish translator at the Social Security Administration. Julie had an appointment with a Mexican man that couldn't speak English at 9 o'clock. And she left the rear end of the Merle Federal Building on the first floor to walk to the front of the building to the Social Security waiting room to get her client. And so Julie was returning back to her office and got about halfway through the building when the bomb went off at 9:02. The rescue workers said if she had 2.5 or 3 seconds been further deep into the building, she would have survived. You know, after she was killed, I was really angry with God because he let it happen. And I was angry at myself. I didn't even want to have a trial for Tim McVeigh and Terry Nichols for the first month. I just wanted them fried. You know, that was my, and that was coming from somebody who always opposed the death penalty. All my life I had. Tim McVeigh's father, Bill, was going to be on the television, and I remember that my thought was, I don't want to see this. I didn't leave the room or change the channel, and I remember seeing him being interviewed. He was standing in front of his house. Bill was stooped over the flower bed, or he was nervously picking weeds from it or something. And the reporter asked him a series of questions, and on his final answer, he stood directly up, and he looked into the television cameras for 2 seconds. and I could see a broken man and grief in his eyes, because I was living that same grief at that same moment. Bill McVeigh and I had one thing in common. We had both buried our children. They died in very different ways, but we both buried our children. I often tell people when I'm speaking that when your parents die, you go to the hilltop and you bury them. When your children die, you bury them in your heart. And it's forever. It never goes away.
Kiss me, mother, kiss your darling. Lay my head upon your breast. Throw your loving arms around me. I am weary, let me rest. Through the years, you've always loved me, and my life you've tried to save, but now I shall slumber sweetly in a deep and lonely grave. Kiss me, mother, kiss your darling. Lay my head upon your breast. Throw your loving arms around me. I am weary, let me rest. I am weary, let me rest.
Thanks for being a great audience, patient audience. It's not an easy listen all the way through, is it? There's some difficult stories there. I just wanted to share something with you about the process. I actually arrived in Oklahoma City on Sunday, and today's Tuesday. It is Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? Yeah. I got here on Sunday night, and I met these guys for the first time yesterday morning. And so everything you just saw, we accomplished in one day. And the reason that that should be a bit of a surprise. You a bit surprised by that? You think, how did they? And the reason I wanted to make that point and make that point at the end was it demonstrates what you can achieve with this process and this method. And one of the reasons we're out here, one of the reasons I'm working with Elizabeth, and one of the reasons we put together this education pack is the hope that you might take some of these techniques and utilize them and make your own dramas, find your own testimonies, find your own really important stories in your communities, in your families, in your school, and create your own plays. And they don't have to be long. They can be short. That was 35, 40 minutes. You can make something that's 5 minutes, 3 minutes. So I really want to encourage everybody, the theatre students amongst you, to explore some of these techniques, this verbatim work, not just because you can kind of create really interesting work and you can bring interesting stories to the stage. It's a really interesting process from an acting point of view. And hopefully, if we get we've got a bit of time for some questions, we'll get the guys here to talk a little bit about that, and I can answer some questions about that as well if you do have any. So we have this education pack, and the education pack is partly about verbatim theatre, and there's some exercises in there and really simple things that you can do and little tips about how to conduct the interviews and how you kind of create the scripts and how you deal with some of the technology to be able to make it happen. But also part of it's about the play itself in the middle of the West. And one of the aims I had when, once I'd done all the interviews, I interviewed a lot of people for the project. I didn't do all the interviews myself. Some of them were done by students at the time from Oklahoma City University, and some were done by teachers there as well. But anyway, a lot of people were interviewed. And it really struck me how many different perspectives people had on the bombing from all different types of kind of political positions, all different parts of the community, but there were lots of different viewpoints. And I think that's one of the things that I think it's worth considering this many years after the bombing, thinking about how people feel differently from where they're stood, from what they're seeing. And I think, I'm not going to get political about it now, but I don't need to tell you, you've got a lot going on right now in the country. And in some ways, revisiting this project, I thought in some ways it's kind of more relevant now than it was 10 years ago. And I'd be interested if you, from what you've heard there and maybe what if you get an opportunity to look at more of the play, more of the testimonies from the play, I'd be interested in what you might have to think about that as well. So that's something to think about. So there's these two broad parts of the education pack. Number of exercises around the play and how the play discusses the bombing, and the other side's about the theatre techniques. Just to let you know that you'll all have kind of physical paper packs, or the teachers will anyway, but we're going to create some web pages to extend that teaching resource, because one of the things I'm really interested in from over in the UK, as a verbatim theatre practitioner, is I really want to find out if any of you are using these methods, or any of you are looking at the play as a way of thinking and starting conversations about the legacy of the bombing. I'm really interested in getting that feedback from you. So one of the things I really want to be doing in the coming weeks is, through your teachers, is trying to find a way of getting that feedback. So please, if you do get some communication from me via anybody that's about the show and these verbatim techniques, please do be generous with your feedback and give me a little bit of time to say what you think and whether any of your ideas have changed around this kind of theatre. I mean, just out of interest, how many people have seen a verbatim theatre performance before? Hands up if you've seen something in a theatre. Oh, great, we have got some people. Was that a professional show, or was it a student? Thank you, that's a good idea. What? Oh, okay. In Oklahoma City, or? Oh, right. What, do you know remember what it's called? No. Okay. And hands up people who had heard of this form of verbatim theatre, or? No? Well, I'm going to tell you, we have. I'm going to tell you a really interesting, a boring teachery fact before we move on, that this has come full circle, because I first found out about verbatim theatre when I was working in London at a theatre called the Royal Court Theatre, which is quite a famous new writing theatre in London. And there were some actors who'd been over, one in particular, had been over in Los Angeles, and there was a writer, performer there called Anne Devere Smith. I don't know if anyone's heard of her. And she made a play about the LA riots in 1993. and using this verbatim technique. And this British actor came back to London and shared that, and that triggered the growth of this movement and the development of verbatim theatre in London and England. So in fact, I'm just coming back to where it started for us, I suppose. Anyway, that's an incidental fact. So, questions? Yeah. Do you have any questions for me or for any of these guys? Yeah.
I feel like what really helps is the audios that we have playing, because it's the raw emotion is playing in our ears. So I feel like that really helps with their accents and but everything's just so real in their interviews. So I feel like that really helps.
It's something that we were talking about just earlier today, that that it's a lot of this like kind of outside in work rather than like, oh, I think they're feeling sad in this moment, and so I'm going to try and portray sadness. Instead, it's more, this is what I hear in their voice and I'm mimicking that, and then, oh, you realize, oh, their voice sounds this way because they're actually tearing up a little bit, or because of this and that and the other. And it's been really interesting to, rather than trying to do all of the actor work with the text and be like, oh, this is what they're feeling in this moment, actually just getting to hear them and, portray that in their authentic experience rather than putting something on that wasn't there.
Just to add to that, in some of obviously not with these guys, we just met yesterday, I haven't had a lot of time, but in other projects, I've worked with actors who they've been able to meet the people that they were interviewing, and so the person themselves becomes like a kind of character study for them. That's can be quite intense though for actors to actually meet the person they're playing, and very weird when they come to see the show. So I was just saying to the guys that Jennifer Reynolds, who's the journalist, right at the beginning, she was the news anchor on the day of the bombing. And she's retired now, but she was and she's worked with us she worked with us in the original play, and she helped us with the British production. But I've never met her, and she's never seen the show, never seen herself portrayed. But she's coming to one of the performances while on this little run we're doing. So, I think it's going to be quite weird for you to meet her. But it's a bit of a responsibility, obviously, if you're playing somebody that comes to see you. Any other questions or observations? Doesn't have to be a question. Yeah?
Which stories connected you?
Oh,
I know all that. I think for me, the one that when I was doing it, I just kind of felt natural was Chris Scholler. He kind of has a really distinct tempo where you can feel where he's thinking just by the and the elongations in his words. And his whole thing was really about figuring out how to care for all these people who were in trouble. But what ended up happening was after the big first group of people, there was nobody left to take care of. Nobody else came because they were, So I thought that was really emotionally impactful and important.
Yeah, for me it was probably Jan, which is in the same scene as Chris. I don't know, I'm a little bit of a logic person, and she's just very, straightforward and exactly direct, exactly what she means is what she's saying. But just like, I don't know, her experience with both seeing the terrifying things that were like just horrible, but also being able to see like how beautiful the impact on the community was of people coming together, taking care of each other, and her being able to balance all of that complexity of those opposite feelings of these horrible things that she had to go hands-on work with, and then also getting to, hands-on work with people in the community to take care of them, that's really meaningful to me, that she was still able to find peace about the work that she was doing because she knew she was helping the community and she could see the rest of her community doing the same thing.
I feel like Erin's story probably hit me the hardest. It's an absolutely devastating story with Chris and her child. I mean, as actors, a lot of us, we bring our personal experiences in because that's what makes us who we are. My boyfriend's a first responder, and I know what he goes through. So I kind of took that into account, especially when working the scene with Chris. But yeah, it's a devastating story. I remember first learning about it. It was just, I can't imagine as a mother having to see your dead child plastered everywhere. And the grieving, it just makes it 10 times harder.
I think the story that I cling to the most is Mark, who's the arborist. I just think that more than anything, he has this kind of odd obsession with trees, and it's this weird kind of passion that he has, and then getting thrown into this horrific situation and being able to help in the way that he can is really inspiring, and also the story of what that tree means now, of how like it kind of represents the legacy of everybody who is impacted, and I mean this story too. So I think this little segment of the story of the tree that you really at first glance probably wouldn't think about with the OKC bombing is such a huge part to remembering these lives and honoring the legacy of what happened.
It's I think people know the tree. Right? It's a really big tree now. I think it's an elm tree. I remember him saying that they normally live about 100 years. So they're now thinking about what they do once. I mean, I think the little seedlings from that tree have gone all over the world. But they've got obviously some new plans for what they'll do finally when the tree just naturally dies. But anyway, do you have another question or comment, observation? I saw you had your hand up first. Now it's you. Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, yeah, but we're trained and we're pretty experienced in doing that kind of thing. We just came from another space that was probably the size of that little square up there, so this is quite a bit different. But it's certainly it's definitely a challenge, but it's fun to.
Because we're thinking about their voice type more than the
Yeah.
emotion.
That's what me with Erin is Erin has a very unique voice. She constantly kind of like throughout the audio has kind of been like a almost like edge of crying kind of sound, but it's easy to project with. It's just her unique voice. I don't really know how to explain it. That's just a different experience with this rather than emotion, just trying to portray the voice.
Another one of the challenges I think with this is all of the audio that we're hearing is a really intimate, like sit-down conversation. Like we're talking about this really challenging thing to talk about, and then our job is to get up on a stage and say those same things in that same story in the same way to a crowd full of people. And how do you maintain that same authenticity and that same emotion and that same level of emotional depth while projecting to this big of a room?
Yeah, with any emotion or any of this authenticity we're going for, I kind of try to think of it like we're sharing. So it's never really about the sadness or the anger. Instead, I want to share it with y'all. So like when he's getting choked up, what matters more is that y'all can hear me and understand the things I'm saying. Because if that doesn't happen, then we kind of lose everything. So as long as I know I can share with y'all, then all the emotions can kind of just happen.
Yeah.
So what I did first, once we were cast and talked about it, I didn't learn about this in Texas schools, but I learned about it in a college credit class, like very vaguely. But once we were cast, I listened to a podcast about it, and my mom went to OU, so she was there when it happened. So after I listened to the podcast and got the whole story about it, I called my mom and I talked to her about it, her experience with what it felt like when that happened. And I called my grandma at the same time because her and my grandpa worked in federal government. So I talked to her about that, her experience. But that's personally what I did.
Yeah, when we got in the room itself, what really changed is like, you do all your research, you look at the lines, you listen to the recordings, but we get in there, and Steve had the advantage of having been with us for so long, as well as conducting many of the interviews. He gives us context. So, like, if there's certain moments where maybe something isn't clicking, he can say how it was talking to them, or kind of refresh our memory on certain moments to make sure that the through line of the message is clear.
Yeah, and something for me, like I had a base knowledge of what happened. I went to the memorial, and that's what I knew going into the process. And so it was actually really interesting to learn about this experience directly from firsthand accounts rather than from a textbook or, researching an article online. Like actually genuinely sitting down and listening to these recordings or reading these transcripts of them and just like actually learning about it from the people who were there and who all had such varying experiences, whether it was because they were a survivor or because they were family members of them or, worked on a memorial site or whatever it was. They all had such varying levels of closeness to it and also varying levels of perspective on it. And so getting to learn about it from that, I think, was just really impactful for me just as a person because, it's really easy to read something online or to read something out of a textbook and have all of the head knowledge of it, but not really the impact of what it actually means and how it directly affected people. But to get to hear those people's voices recount something 20 years later and then 10 years now after those 20-year-old recordings is just really, that meant a lot to me to be able to be a part of it.
I think anyone who's used drama and theatre to in any kind of process, you'll often hear people say, "Oh, actually, I felt I had more empathy for this story because I'm not walking in someone's shoes. By actually speaking their words, I feel a kind of closer connection, and I have a better understanding of their perspective." Where you can imagine with this sort of process, where you're not just walking in their shoes, but you're embodying their voice. It really means that there's almost an unconscious connection between you and that person. And I've had this countless times with actors and students who've worked in this way, where they've had quite a profound experience because they feel they've really occupied a perspective, an emotional and an intellectual perspective of somebody, and they feel they've almost merged with it. And and particularly if it's something that they wouldn't have related to, or they might have even disagreed with. And that's why this sort of process can be a really good learning tool as a way of really developing your empathy and a deep understanding of other situations, other individuals and other community situations and experiences. Yeah.
It just takes all the fluff out of it, the in between and the part where the unknowns where we're just making stuff up and hoping it works. You kind of make up a backstory and stuff for your character, but for this there isn't that. You don't have to make up anything, and you have the line delivery, so that really helps.
Yeah, everything is right there for you. When you're playing a role in any show that's fictional, you get to explore different things. How do I want them to sound? How do I want them to walk? You have the lines, but you don't obviously have anything else, and that's all you. But here you have everything, and they're real people, and you have to do justice to their stories and do justice to those real people because they might come and see it and see themselves portrayed on the stage, which is definitely going to be an interesting thing.
Oh,
A week.
Probably a week.
Yeah,
I didn't have it until yesterday.
On top of that, like we had school and work, and so like
That's okay.
yeah, that's
They're
really
very
had the-
busy.
I got it yesterday morning.
yeah, it got very, very busy, and so I emailed the edits, the edited recordings. But yeah,
It didn't deliver to me.
it didn't deliver to Joy though. So, but this is the thing. I mean, I'm repeating myself, but the thing about this technique is it doesn't take long before you can. I mean, yeah. I mean, Joy had a script this morning, and then didn't have one this afternoon. So you should really try it out.
We described it earlier as it's very similar to knowing a song and singing with the lyrics to a song. It only takes you maybe 4 or 5, maybe even less times to hear a song before you start picking up and singing along. It's very similar.
But you need the song playing,
Yeah.
and then you can sing along to it. But if it wasn't playing, you couldn't. Everyone's done that. Sing along in the bar. the shower.
Yeah.
This has been such a fast process.
That-
I don't
I
feel like
haven't
you've
even
had
thought
time
about
for rituals.
I just kind of do my normal thing.
yeah.
Do some breathing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just breathing,
Breathe.
taking a second,
Sing
and then get
through
into
the
it.
melody of our little song. And then
Yeah. It's very different from other shows, for sure.
What did you think? I asked this question this morning. I'm quite interested because obviously, if we were casting this, you may have noticed there are quite a lot of older characters. We started with Sam, the chief of police, and the mayor. Sam Gonzalez sadly passed, I think, 2 years ago. Ron Norrick's still alive. They're older characters. So generally, you'd look to cast older people. So it was a big ask from these students who are 20, 21 to play a 72-year-old and then play 40-year-old and Jennifer Reynolds is late 60s. How did that feel as an audience? Were you aware? Was that a jolt? Were you kind of thinking that's a bit difficult to watch? I know this person's older, but that's kind of some people it was a bit a jolt, or some people it was okay. How? What was? Did you kind of forget about it? How was that okay? If you see what I mean, from an audience perspective. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose I mean if I say to somebody who's 20, play a 70-year-old, I'm an old person, and they're going to give an up, and we're not doing that. So one of the notes was, well, don't play old, don't play young and start dancing around, because that would be, but let's just try and let the voice, rely on the voice, projecting, communicating the age. And I'm kind of interested, that I've heard the real voices, and I know how good a job they're doing. So for me, I just hear the original person, but I don't know how it comes across for people who've never heard the original person. Do you know what I mean? I can't put myself in your shoes, because that's why I'm interested in what it's like, whether it's a bit jarring when you see someone really young play someone really old. Yeah? talked before about the different kind of viewpoints and perspectives from the different characters. I'm just a question back to you. I'm interested in, were there any that stood out for you, that surprised you or resonated with you, or you disagreed with, or you agreed with, or you could particularly empathize with, or that interested you out of those that you heard? Because there were a number of different points of view on the events, weren't there? Any observations about that? Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Yeah. 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 The one that interests me, because then, is Rebecca and Christy, because, and maybe you can relate to that because you all look really young, is that, if you were in the bombing and you didn't even remember being in the bombing because you were 4 years old, but then the rest of your life, is dictated by the bombing because everyone knows you were in the bombing. And every year on April the 19th, the news people come round. And I think when she says, I didn't want to be that girl anymore, I find that one interesting. I think it's really interesting that your life is defined by something you had no control over before you even had a memory that even happened. Which is obviously very different from Aaron, the mother who lost a baby. But she has the same thing, which is the flip side, the downside for some people of the bombing being remembered in the way it does. It comes every year, because every year they have to go through it all again, I suppose. Any other comments about that, or observations, or anything anyone wants to say? Or any more questions about anything else? Yeah.
Your whole play.
Oh not the moment. I don't think someone should put it on in the. Someone should put the play on, put the whole thing on. There's more music in the production, so you got that song at the end. So it's actually a play with songs. There's quite a lot of kind of country bluegrass songs in the production.
Where can they find your play, though?
On just Google it. You can.
I believe it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon, yeah. But we're going to be putting parts of the play on the online resource. So if you don't get it, you won't see it in the pack. There's some of the speeches, there's extracts of speeches in the pack, but far more bigger parts of and some video is going to be on the web resource. So hopefully that should really be useful. But I would love it if somebody would do the whole show in Oklahoma, and I would quite happily supply the recordings if you wanted to use those. Anyone else know?
Okay, we're going to have a quick poll coming up on the screen in a moment. It's coming down. So if you have a phone, which I'm betting a lot of you do, it's been burning in your pocket, you can pull it out, and hopefully the QR code will work. It's got a long ways to come down. And teachers, as he mentioned, we're going to be building out more resources for this over the summer and next fall in partnership with the Oklahoma History Center, so that will be coming your way. We're working on it right now, so we're excited. If you can fill out a quick survey, I think it's 4 questions or 5, that would be awesome. If the QR code doesn't work, you can type in the link into your browser and that should work.
Don't take it personally.
West students, once you are finished filling out the survey, if you will remain in your seats for a few moments, the bell will ring very shortly for 7th hour, and at that time you are dismissed to your 7th hour. Unless you're in my class, then you get to stay here.
Yeah, we get rid of the lights.